Okay, hi. Thank you very much for joining us, Elisa and Veronica. And
You're
we're happy
welcome.
to have you.
Hi.
For anyone who might be watching or listening to this interview after it's posted, Elisa is a physician, an author, and a blogger who wrote about how her life changed after her son died and the lessons that she has learned from him because he was channeled from heaven, believe it or not. So thank you very much. And I suppose we'll start the interview by, it would be great if you could tell us a bit about who Erik was when he was alive and some of your happiest memories with him.
Well, I'll tell you, he was different from birth to 14 years old, so I'll describe that first. He was always such a happy kid, so easy. He was an easy baby, very affectionate, although he liked to tease and prank the family members, especially his siblings. Uh, but I remember, for example, when he was must have been 18 months old. I took him to the pediatrician for his immunizations. I always hate that because he came home. I took him. He came home with me. I was holding him, and his thighs were just littered with Band-Aids. And it was just, had tears running down his cheeks. And his father, my husband, says, how are you doing, Erik? And he said, I have a good time, and patted my back, like to comfort me. He didn't want us to get upset that he had a hard time, at the pediatrician. So that was sweet.
He always wanted
And
to comfort you.
well, even after his death, he 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 was so sweet to people, much nicer than they were to him. I remember he would go, for example, to Starbucks, our local Starbucks, mostly to bum cigarettes because his mama physician would not let him smoke. And he wanted to meet friends too, and most of the time somebody would wander up to him and sit share their story, and very often it was kind of a sad story, and it would break down.
Are you still connected, Lisa? I think I lost the video for a bit.
Like, Mom, put on a pot roast quick. So he did, and I remember reading his Facebook messages to people after he died. Oh gosh, it was like so many of them said, I hear you're having trouble. Do you want me to come and sit with you for a while? Things like that. So he was a very kind and caring person.
Very sorry, we're just arranging the room here. But
Welcome to our world with Erik, because we typically, when Erik comes on, technology goes woohoo, and we freeze, and all kind of funky things happen. So, FYI, be ready.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that today. But I'm really grateful that you're speaking to us anyway. We're just moving location here for a bit. So, what do you feel are some of the greatest lessons that you learned from Erik? Even, I'm very sorry.
Are you guys in an Irish pub?
Sorry about this. 106?
One of my favorite
we're in a
pubs
hotel
was,
at the moment, and there's a bit of confusion about the room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oliver Pluckett or Oliver Pluckett? What is it? The pub. I can't remember where it is, but the Oliver Plunkett or Pluckett. Oh, so cool.
Yeah, I know.
I love your Irish pubs there.
It's a little bit chaotic at the moment here. I'm very sorry. Do you think it might be a good idea to just do this part of the interview over because there was a lot of interruption?
No, keep going. We'll figure it out. It's all on record.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. In a minute you'll be calm.
I'm really sorry about all this.
In a minute you'll be calm. We're going to a room, suite. All good. Quiet.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'm really sorry about this.
Yeah.
Things are going a bit haywire. Let's refocus.
Is this a video actually going to be published, or are you just gathering information for print?
Both.
Both, yes. We may cut out all this awkward room transference, but it's...
From you.
I told her it's Erik.
Oh, Erik.
He's a bugger.
Yeah.
That's Erik messing with us, unfortunately. Erik, stop it, for the love of God. I'm going to put you in timeout.
You can still push him to time out as his mom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Peace and quiet.
We ride the minibar.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I'm very sorry about all this interruption. It was just, confusing.
It happens.
Okay, so let's just get back on track and try and jump back into it.
Okay.
So the next question I wanted to ask you then was what you feel are the greatest lessons that you taught you in his life. I know obviously he had his troubles and he had mental health problems, but which is always very difficult for a parent to cope with, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But what did you learn from, I suppose, just...
I guess, I learned so much from all of my kids. I have 5 of them. And I think one of the things that I've learned as a mother is ego does not belong in motherhood at all. It's such a humbling experience to have children. And if you choose to, they make you a better person. And that was the case with Erik. And we had so many trying times with him, really difficult times, really scary times. And I guess what I learned is that while he was alive is that I need to show him and all my kids as much unconditional love as possible. And I did that. Every phone call ended with "I love you." I mean, a meaningful one. Every time my kids leave to go somewhere, "I love you. Be careful." Things like that. And even when they were sitting in my lap, sometimes it didn't work out so well. Come here, you 160-pound kid. Sit on Mama's lap. But I'd smother her with kisses, and I was annoyingly sappy. But now I don't regret that a bit, obviously.
Yeah,
So.
of course. So Veronica, I know you can only be with us for a short while, so I'll move on to some of your questions. For example, I want to talk about how you experience mediumship, because I know that different mediums have different ways of channeling the people that they work with. What does mediumship mean to you, basically?
So for me, it's an honor and a privilege to be the conduit. And what I'll say is the experience that each individual who is a medium has is unique, I believe, to the personality of the medium and in coordination with the person they're channeling. And so it's like you form a relationship and you have a dynamic with the energy, the person that you're translating for. And it always seems to me, it's always interesting to me how, so Erik will only go with me to a certain extent. He knows who I am so well, and he knows my comfort level, and he knows how I best deliver and what I'm comfortable delivering. And so we have a really great rapport. I don't lose my faculties. I don't leave my body like some people do. It's very much like he's right here, and he is, and I'm doing this, and I'm being the translator for him. It's an awesome experience.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, she's an awesome channel.
Yeah. Very easy to relate to.
Yeah.
And when you connect with Erik, can you really get a strong sense of his personality straight away? And you just, is it the sense that you always just know what it is he wants to say as soon as you connect with him?
Well, what was funny is I really, when I first met Elisa and Erik, I had no clue who they were or what they were. And we have a mutual friend or acquaintance, Elisa and I, and she introduced me. And, when I went on to talk, I didn't realize that it was a show we were doing. And I was very nervous, very apprehensive. And Erik was very comforting and very forthcoming. And he kind of just nudged me and pushed me in a way that made me feel like I knew him forever. So as Elisa said in the opening of this, people would be drawn to him and he would go out. He was very warm and very welcoming. And I was terrified. I've been doing this work for a long time, but I thought I just knew the magnitude, the bigness of what this means, and to be introduced to somebody that feels like Erik feels was a really big deal. And I was very nervous. But
he's just little old me.
He was, and now it's like he's a big pain in the ass sometimes.
No, really.
Mm-hmm.
Elisa, you know I say that with love.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, it's just little old me. I mean, if you had just interviewed my family members and took like an inventory of all my quirks and flaws, you would not have been nervous at all.
Well, I think I wanted to, you know, here you were the mother of this powerful energy, and that's how he came across to me. And I was like, you know, and he's going, breathe, breathe. And then in the interim, he's just throwing all these little anecdotes in about, you know, how he's such a prankster and how he toys and, you know, don't take life so seriously. And it was like, you know, it's all over the place.
Can I ask, Veronica, do you, like, at this moment, do you have a sense that there might be something he wants to say in this interview, or...
Oh, he always wants to say something.
I was just going to say, is there a time when Erik doesn't want to say anything? You know what? He couldn't be more proud, he's saying, of his mom. He's saying that he really knows that this was a stretch for her to come out of her quote-unquote traditional scientific box. And he wants to acknowledge that publicly, how proud he is of her. And he's also just over the moon, literally, he says, about the work he's doing and the lives he's helping to heal, transform. And he's really proud to be doing this. And he knows that he could only do this, he says, in another state of being. He did a little bit of it here on Earth, he says, but nowhere near what I'm doing now. So he's really good with where he is.
Good.
Well, obviously in the book that he and Elisa wrote, My Life After Death, he talks a lot about the beautiful energy of heaven and just how blissful and easy things are there compared to, obviously, the challenges that we go through here on Earth. What would be, I suppose, his advice or his insight into how we can bring some of that energy down to our daily lives and bring heaven to Earth?
Great question.
Yeah. So, Erik, what do you think? He goes right to the word love. He said everything boils down to the 4 letters LOVE. And each letter vibrates, has its own energy. And when you put them together, they vibrate and resonate at a very high level. And so he's saying the basic difference between here and there, he says, is that love is literally the universal language. And the soul expresses love by feelings. There isn't like a dialogue happening where he is. It's almost telepathy where they're feeling and communicating these high vibrational feelings of love. And he's saying that humanity needs to be more willing to process and feel these feelings. Because what's happening, he says, in humanity right now, people are just acting randomly, and he's using air quotes, randomly, and they're bringing forward all of their stuff. And if we would just all stop and breathe and be in those 4 letters, LOVE, we would have a much, much more compassionate existence here on Earth.
Now, he told me,
you know, those words are actually resonating with me. Right,
sometimes I forget.
Sorry. I was just going to say that those words are actually resonating with me right now. Even as I sit here, I can feel myself becoming calmer because I was quite frazzled after all that confusion with the room and thinking, oh no, the interview was ruined and all this kind of thing. But, you know, your words just bring back to me that things happen the way they happen and it's just meant to be. It's
Erik has taught me, I think one of the many things that Erik has taught me, I was always the kind of person I needed to know. And I needed to strategize. I needed to plan. I needed to know every detail. And Erik's like, dude, you are never going to know every detail. And to what end? Because once you know one detail, there's one more detail and one more detail. And his message to me was, you just chill and let it unfold. Whatever it is. And whoever resonates with it will resonate with it. And whoever doesn't. And if they don't resonate with it, they're not ready to wake up to it. Period, he says. period.
Yeah, it does. It does. I will have to say, take a lot of courage to be a medium, because we are still in that stage where that was very similar to when everybody thought the Earth was flat, and then some guy, and I can't remember who it is, Copernicus, Galileo, I don't know, y'all help me, said that the world is round, and then he just got ridiculed and scorned, and I think he was even thrown in jail. But look at it now. The Earth is. There are still people who think the Earth is flat, though, and or hollow, but the Earth is round. It reminds me of Arthur Schopenhauer's quote. He says that truth comes in three phases. First, it's ridiculed, then it's scorned, and eventually it's accepted as self-evident. And hopefully, these really gifted mediums like Veronica can remember that and soldier on and bring light to the world.
Absolutely. So, as you know, Paul, the publisher, is in the room with me, and he wanted to ask Erik to describe a typical day in the afterlife, or a day as it might be understood in the afterlife. I'm sure they have very different concepts of time there.
The first thing Erik says is there is no time. Time is a linear thing that we do here. There is no time. He said he's not even going to waste his time trying to explain that concept. But what he will say is it's daily. There's a daily schedule of learning, guiding, teaching, and sharing. And he says that happens on his level so that he can groom, grow, cultivate his soul. But while he's doing that, he's also guiding his piece, if you will. He says, my piece of the human plane. So in other words, he's watching over, and some people, he's saying, might call that a spirit guide. He's not assigned to any one particular person. He's working on, actually, Erik has a very big mission, and he's downplaying this, but he's telling me he's working on perception. And perception is an energy. And one of the things that Erik is working on is shifting perception on mental illness. And I do believe, and he confirms this many times, he's reached out to me because I have a personal history with family mental illness. And Erik and I are ponying up, if you will, to create perception, awareness, and shifts. And he said that's what he spends his time doing.
Yeah. I want to return to something that you brought up briefly, Elisa, or maybe it was Veronica who mentioned it, your journey from skeptic to believer, because you did come from a scientific background as a physician, and as I understand it, you didn't believe in things that you couldn't see, touch, hear, all of that. How did that journey develop for you?
Well, it didn't help that I was raised by two atheists. And I'm talking about militant atheists. My parents are were so atheist that the first words my father said when I called him crying and saying Erik had died, he said, "Sorry, Elisa, but Erik's going to turn to dust." That was his words of comfort.
I read that in the book and I couldn't believe it.
Oh, he was a horrible man.
Why would you say that to a grieving mother?
He's bad. He's
sure
a psychopath. Anyway, that's another long story. But 3 days after Erik died, I think it's in the book, he calls me all panicky. "Oh, Lisa, I was just sitting in the chair reading Wall Street Journal or whatever, and I put the paper down, and there's Erik standing right in front of me, and then he turns into his little boy self, and he crawls into my lap. I don't know what to believe. I'm so startled." All right, now, look, this is not the kind of guy that would make something like that up to make me feel, to give me any hope. He's not that kind of guy. So that's what made me think, wow. So then I started doing the reading about quantum physics and controlled studies on mediums and near-death experiences and all sorts of things, parallel dimensions and such. And at the same time, I had the blog, and I was getting all sorts of signs and pranks from Erik that I would also log into the blog, and then blog members started getting pranked by Erik, and it just blossomed. It just exploded.
So, what are some of the happiest moments that you've experienced with Erik since his passing? I know he has a habit of playing pranks and everything. Do you have any nice stories like that you would like to share?
Oh yeah, gosh. I remember when early on, we started remodeling the kitchen. And my husband, every time he came home from work, from the garage into the kitchen, the downdraft vent that comes up, when you push a button to suck up all the smoke and such, would go up and then down. And every afternoon when he came home, it went up and down, and that was kind of weird because there was no power going to it was completely gutted of power. There was no way. I mean, he would turn on blenders that were unplugged, or he would manifest little airsoft BBs at the ceiling and have them drop to the floor next to us. He called us on the phone one time. Several times where he actually manifested physically. Like one time when I was about to lay my head down on the pillow to go to bed, I saw him jumping from one foot of the bed to the other, back and forth, and my deceased sister Denise was sitting on the left foot of the bed, just grinning at him and looking at him. And I just couldn't believe it. I said, well, I know I'm not asleep because I haven't even had a chance to lay down. And there he is going back and forth and back and forth. And then he looks at me. He has this completely startled expression on his face. And he says, Mom, you can see me. Runs into my arms and we hug. And it just didn't, unfortunately, last a long time. But even after all these things happened, one time he called us on the telephone. I don't know if I said that already. Yeah, I did. But time would pass and doubts would creep in. And then I would start second guessing myself because of the skeptic I was. Until one event that happened that made me believe 100% and never to doubt again. And that was when I heard his voice on one of our recorded sessions. And it was so clearly him. I know the sound of Erik's voice. I know the way he says breakfast, like a little kid. I recognize his throat clearing. It's amazing. I even showed the housekeeper that helped raise him when I was really busy as a doctor. Raised him since he was 18 months. She listened to it. I said, who is this? And she goes, oh, Erik. So, and then we had it analyzed by a sound professional who said, it's not a human voice. Left no voice signature, among other things. So that was probably one of the happiest moments. And I still have it recorded. It's also on my YouTube channel. I think it's called Voices of the Dead. And since then, he's left a lot of EVPs on radio shows and things like that. For example, and the host called me the next day and said, Elisa, there's a voice that was not heard live. And so I listened, and it was him saying minions really loudly. Anybody would have noticed it.
Really?
And then the medium starts laughing and says he's calling them minions. And another time you can hear him saying pushing her, and the medium starts laughing and says he's pushing you. So lots of things that are just beyond. I mean, you just.
Can I share a quick story? It just
Sure.
It just happened last week. I was sitting on my couch in my living room. At the end of my evening, I like to watch my fire, sip a glass of wine, and just like the quiet. And I had my book, and I was sitting on my couch and reading my book, and all of a sudden, my TV flicked on in my living room. It came on. Now, sometimes, I'll sit on the remote, or I was nowhere near the remote controls. So it flicked on, and I thought, okay, all right, first time, whatever. So I sit down again. I go back to reading the book. The TV flicks on again. Now, this time, I thought my husband, Nick, was screwing around because sometimes he turns the TV on with his phone and he thinks it's funny. So I'm screaming, Nick, stop it. Nick's in the next room. He comes out. The TV goes on, and we're both standing there. And it's like, and I look at him, and he now even goes, Erik.
Oh, my gosh. That's a cool story. I remember one time I was in my second eldest daughter's car, little Honda, and we had to go home because my grandbaby had to do something. I can't remember. And so I was in the passenger seat, and I saw a coin in the little drink holder in the door. So I thought, well, I'll get this and give it to Michelle. And I tried to grab it in my fingers, and I had it in my fingers, and boosh, it just disappeared. It's weird. So lots of things like that happen.
Sounds like there's no end of interesting experiences when Erik is around.
No. No.
So next I'd like
Never
to...
go home it.
Oh,
Sorry.
I suppose next I'd like to go back to something Veronica mentioned about the huge mission that Erik has to raise awareness of mental health, and I'd love to hear your input as well, Elisa, because, you know, obviously as the parent of someone who went through those struggles and unfortunately took his own life, I was wondering what your advice would be, or any words of comfort you might have for parents who are going through similar situations.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to not look at them as, not be afraid of them and shun them, and they need to be understood and loved. They need love and understanding. It's okay to talk to them. And there are a lot of people with mental illness that really don't have mental illness at all. People who hear voices, they might be just channeling, you know? And schizophrenics, very often, they're just souls that have 1 foot in one dimension and a foot in the other dimension. So that's, I don't know, Erik, do you have any advice to parents of those who have a mental illness?
Well, he'd like to give a general message overall that he's really adamant about this. And he's like doing this with his head and messing up his hair and, doing this. And
this is messy always anyway.
Mental health is not a definition, he says, and he's very adamant about it. It's not who you are. It's part of what you are given to manage in this lifetime. And everyone's management plan is different, and it involves many methods of treatment. And he says you can't clump everybody together, and it's not always the holistic or the medicinal that will do the job. Sometimes it's a combination of both. And he's also saying mental illness, the stigma around it is that we're so different that, you want to avoid us. You don't want to talk about us. And he says the reason that is because every single person has a touch of something that could be perceived to be off, and they're fearful of facing what's in their own life. He says depression is a form of being not well mentally. He said, but is it as significant as schizophrenia? No, there's different pieces and parts to manage and different levels.
Sometimes people with mental illness need a life coach. Sometimes they're just off of their spiritual path and need to find that. Sometimes they need energy healers. Sometimes they need psychiatrists and therapists. So there's all sorts of ways to approach different types of mental illness. But I agree, Erik, it shouldn't be a label like I am schizophrenia, It's like doctors who see patients as the diagnosis. So instead of a human being that has a condition and needs to be addressed.
That's exactly his point. Yep.
I'm sure, Elisa, that, after Erik's passing, it must have given you great comfort to, come to the realization that his spirit was still existing and you would be able to continue the relationship after death, because sadly there are so many people who believe that once a loved one dies, that's it. You just never see them again, never hear from them again. You can't continue to develop
Rest in peace. Yeah. Rest in peace. Erik never going to rest in peace. Yeah. But that's one of the things I've learned. One of the biggest things I've learned since Erik's passing is that you can continue to have a relationship with people you lose to the other side. I mean, they're the same. They just don't happen to have a body. That's it. And they're in a parallel dimension that is on top of ours. So there's no reason to stop communicating with them.
Can I offer up something? Erik is telling me this is important. So if I may, is that okay?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
He wants to give credit to everybody that does mediumship because he knows it's not an easy task. And what he's saying to me is this. It's important that y'all understand, he says, that y'all understand that it's not like having a conversation like this. The medium is not hearing succinctly this kind of conversation. It's a mix of and it's also words and fragments and pieces. It is only over time that the medium begins to create this direct level of knowing, because it's feeling work, telepathy work, and the more confident the medium is, the more her or his ability will shine through. And that's what he wanted to say.
That's great. I was wondering, do you have any questions you'd like to ask Paul? Do you want to sit down for a bit? Great.
Hey guys, I'm going to jump in.
Okay.
Hi, Paul.
See me there now? Hey, how are you? You can see me, yeah? Cool, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I can't see anything. I'm frozen, but that's cool. As long as I'm not frozen.
So this book kind of came into my life quite dramatically. I was in the library one day and I was getting fascinated by the afterlife. And I've been reading books about near-death experience a lot. And somebody kind of just handed, I don't know what happened, but something weird happened in that. You know the way books end up in your hand? So I read the first one, and then Eliza, you told me about the second one. I read that over Christmas. And there's a bit in the book where Erik talks about that he pokes people sometimes, that he kind of tries to help people by, you know, they're doing a search on the internet and he leads them a certain way. And I felt weirdly that I was being led in some way. It was kind of unusual. I don't know whether that's the case, but I'm a magazine publisher. We publish a holistic magazine. And actually I was kind of craving a bit of excitement. You know, I'd interviewed people like Eckhart Tolle and all those kind of guys. And I was just getting a little bit bored. I thought, and then I was like, wow, we could talk to someone in the afterlife. It was giving me a buzz. And I felt like he was giving me that buzz in some way, but I don't know. I'm guessing.
No, I mean, he's done that. One time, he mailed somebody, one of my friends, one of the books, I can't remember. It just appeared in her mailbox, and nobody claimed to have mailed it to her. And then several times, people will say that it jumps off the shelf.
Here I am.
And, 6 feet.
Yeah.
And the bookstore lands at their feet. That happened to you?
Listen, I was already on board with the show. I was already being the voice and doing all of this. I was in Barnes and Nobles, and I had my cup of coffee, and I'm drinking my coffee, perusing the books, and Erik is kind of there, and all of a sudden, the book tumbles. This book, okay,
yeah.
This book tumbles off the shelf and slides across the floor and lands at my feet, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, dude. All right, dude. I bought another copy of the book because I had the electronic copy. I think he wanted me to have the paper copy.
Oh, it's funny.
So is he up to that kind of stuff all the time? Is he kind
remember one time I was with some friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember I was sitting with a couple of friends at a Mexican restaurant having margaritas, and all of a sudden the salt and pepper shaker just starts sliding from the center of the table and crashes to the floor. So I thought, well, what's going on? I put it back, and again it happened. So he likes to mess and hide things. He likes to hide things from us too.
Veronica, I was going to ask you, this feels like a really significant time for human beings. There's a lot going on. People are talking about, last night here we had a super blue moon. I just wondered some people say, oh, well, it's going to happen in 100 years. But is there something very significant happening, does Erik feel, for us right now are we shifting very significantly?
Absolutely. And he didn't even let you finish. He said absolutely, and we're going to do it very gracefully in terms of nothing's going to blow up, nothing's going to, tip so fast that people are going to be left feeling fearful. This lifting of the veil, as he calls it, this clearness that's happening, is 2018 is going to be a powerful year for that. And he's saying that little bits, people are going to open up to use this gift of feeling as problem solving, because they're reverting home, which is the soul, he says. And that's part of his mission, to get people to wake up to the soul, to understand energetically how we function and what we're about. Because we're not this, and we're not the bully or the mom or we're the soul. And that's part of what he's really an advocate for.
In one of the books he described how the brain was kind of this human kind of, it messes with us basically, the brain, it's all our programming. So can you just explain the difference between the brain, the mind, and the spirit, just so we really get that for readers? Yeah.
So the brain is the computer, he says. The brain is what you load. The brain is where, mommy called me this and daddy called me that, and I was boy and I wear blue, and this is where the initial programming starts, he says. So think of it as downloaded, okay? The mind, he's saying, is the connection it's the energetic connection to the soul. And so the mind can think for itself once it decides and chooses that it's going to take the spiritual path. And he's saying to me the word is consciousness. Once it becomes conscious that there's choice, then you work with the mind. So the brain has what it knows, puts it in there. As the person wakes up, grows up, enlightens, it goes into the mind, and then it filters through the mind, and then it becomes a part of life. That's ideal, he says. A lot of times people get stuck in the brain. They don't move past the brain. And the brain is repetition, he says. The brain knows what it knows because it's pre-programmed, and it'll never get you anywhere.
Great answer. That's a great answer.
One of the things that I learned from Erik that's very important is he says that we are emotional beings. So we are made of that energy, emotion, love actually. But he says that the mistake we humans make is that we think first and feel second. So we think of a thought, that evokes an emotion, and that emotion creates our decision or choice or whatever. What we really should do is feel first. Tap into our intuition, feel our emotion, and have that create a thought, and have that thought create the choice.
He says, Mom, you're absolutely right, because humanity calls intuition second nature. And he goes, no, it's first nature. We were first born as feeling beings.
Wow.
Right.
So head to heart is kind of the journey we're making, and he described that we're making it gracefully. I suppose people are kind of wondering what's the best thing to do. Is it meditation? Is it sit in silence? Is it call in help? Or is it all those things? What can we do to actively, I suppose, really make this shift as graceful as possible, each and every one of us?
Ooh, I like that question.
Yeah, it's beautiful. He says the first thing that has to happen is there has to be an awareness of choice. And so, unfortunately, he says, awareness of choice typically happens when we're in a situation that is very low vibrating, such as domestic violence, or we're being bullied, or we're in a partnership that we're not happy with, or we're in a job that we go to that's a grind. That's a very low vibrating. So once you're in that situation, you have to have that awareness that you're there. And then you have to say, you have to be grateful. And this sounds contradictory, but I'm telling you, as he's telling me, you have to be grateful for what is. Because when you want to transition into a way of love, he says, the only bridge there, or the primary bridge there is love, is gratitude. So if you have something and you keep pushing it away and you keep, saying, I don't like this, I don't want this, he's saying that you're always going to stay at that level of vibration. And that's why the work that he does and other mediums do are opening up the portals for people to get a glimpse of what it's like to make conscious choice.
Yeah, I'll tell you a personal story that helps to illustrate that. I had my sisters and I had a terrible childhood. I mean, my parents were both very well-renowned doctors in the Houston area, but they beat us senseless from the time we were 5 years on and up. I mean, so bad. I'm talking broken bones, cracked skulls. 3 of us ran away and became homeless to escape it. So it was really a terrible time. And during much of my young adulthood, I was totally in victim mode. Looking back, I just wish I had not done that. But then I thought, well, and Erik helped me. there's value in everything, every experience, good or bad. He says that there is really no good or bad. There are just experiences, and you have to seek the value. So, any of you guys out there, if you're suffering, there's value there. You have to look for it. And what I found was that I learned how to be assertive because of my childhood. I learned how to be more compassionate. I learned how to be nurturing. I learned how to be a really good mother and a really good listener. And I am so grateful for that. If I had not gone through that experience, I would have been probably this selfish, shallow boor of a person. So I love my parents for becoming the relationship villain in this spiritual contract that maybe that helps make me who I am.
Yeah, there's that phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And there's a beautiful thing he says in the book that just blew me away. I was in my kitchen and I thought about it. And he said, when you're in those vulnerable moments, human beings trying to get out of them, he says there's actually great power in those moments. I thought that was incredible. He says you have access to more of who you really are in those moments. I thought that was like, never heard it described that way before. Maybe
he's doing this.
Yeah.
Oh, Erik.
He's being a joke. He's being a joker. But yes.
Hey, yes. Yeah. Erik, you need to leave some sounds, something on the recording so we can hear you.
Yeah, do something about Ireland, Erik.
He's got his guitar with him. There's the energy. I can feel the energy of strumming.
Did he ever visit Ireland, Eliza, with you?
No. Norway, where our relatives are, is about as close as he got.
Well, he can go wherever he wants now, right?
I know, exactly.
Tell him we'll buy him a Guinness if he ever comes here.
Guinness is so good in Ireland. It is not good here.
No.
It doesn't travel well, maybe. I don't know.
It is really good. I wanted to ask you guys as well. You've interviewed some seriously funky people through Erik. Everybody from David Bowie, Jesus, Michael Jackson. And when I saw that on the YouTube, I was like, wow. Where are you getting those suggestions from? And that must be blowing your mind, Eliza. I mean, getting to talk to people like that all the time.
I don't know. Now it's become second nature. They're just another soul that happened to be famous in this lifetime. But in the Jesus interview, that is one of my favorite because
what stood out
you can actually hear his voice. Jesus, did you hear it?
No.
Oh my gosh! It's in the description. It'll tell you the timestamp. But you hear it. I asked, "Are you here on the earth in this particular time?" And you can hear him very clearly saying, "Yes." That's so cool. And that also was analyzed by sound professionals, not a human voice. Actually, it was analyzed by 2 sound professionals.
Wow. Alice, any question? Okay. So, and the one that stands out for you interview-wise is Jesus. Is it you? I heard you interviewing him twice, I think, and you're a pretty good interviewer. You don't mess around. You actually asked Jesus.
Thanks.
Hey, you gave a different answer the other day. What's the story, Jesus? You're giving the wrong answer this time? Yeah. But any other interviews that have really stood out or information that you thought was really powerful?
The Hitler one was really interesting. I really liked that one. I learned a lot, and I don't want to say anything because I would like your readers to watch it for themselves. But it's really interesting. Lots of lessons to be learned. I don't want these to be voyeuristic, like Michael Jackson? Did you mess around with little boys? I don't want to do that. It has to be something that all of us can learn something from. Life lessons, something about the human experience, something about spirituality, etc.
And Veronica, there's changes for human beings over the next while. Does Erik feel that we're going to go through, I know he mentioned the heart, that we're going to go through anything else significant on Earth in the next 10, 20 years?
He said that the change has already begun, and he's saying that status quo has began to shift and shake up mid-2017. And so as we started the trembling, he says, the movement, it can only be expected that it will get deeper. And he's saying that there are professionals who would have not had anything to do with this kind of, he's saying psychology. So he's chiming in saying psychology will begin to merge with intuition, and it will, past life regressions, he's saying, will be more and more relevant in people's lives, not to dwell on, but to understand psychologically. Again, this goes back to his concern for mental illness, to understand psychologically where some of these patterns actually come from. He's saying that the soul takes on many personalities to fulfill what it came here to fulfill, and the soul ultimately needs to cleanse itself at the end, and doing so means resolving all the hang-ups, the psychological stuff, and dealing with that. And humanity will, he's saying, will definitely blend psychology and intuition. That's going to be the biggest change that we will see. Because right now, psychology is more into thought process and not being and why we're here. And past life regression is he's saying, a very necessary tool to come out in the world of psychology.
In Erik's book, he talks about hanging out with God, and I love when he says God can appear in any form that you want him to appear in, or you want her to appear in, and he says he just came into him as a mist, kind of a weird mist, and that was the line he said. But I just got such a nice feeling from that, the way he talked about that in the afterlife God is very present, you feel it. But I believe here we can feel it too, and obviously in nature and the way we connect with each other. But just maybe to just talk about a little bit about God, that's just a beautiful way he described that. Has he hung out with God since?
Always, he says. And he said one of the misconceptions that he really would like to help change, and he believes it is changing, is that God is somewhere other than in here. Because he knows definitively that God is in here. We don't necessarily have to go anywhere to experience God. And he's saying that the vibration, he's calling God the vibration can go further and closer and further and closer as we're here on earth based on human emotion. Okay? And so he's saying once you get on the path to raising your consciousness, you begin to stay more in alignment with the vibration that is God. Whereas Erik is saying he is continuously in that vibration that is God. And it's constantly a presence, constantly aware of it.
One metaphor he used that really helped me, he says that we are whole and part of God. So you can imagine those, y'all are probably too young for this, those little holographic necklaces on a leather strap, like a skull or something. So it's a hologram. If you were to have one of a picture of you, for example, and then you break it, if you were to look under the microscope at each shard, you would see the entire picture of you. So we are like a hologram. We're whole and part of God, and how part we become depends on how strong that illusion of separation is, because separation is an illusion, and that is created by the ego, and it's really necessary in order to get the most out of the human experience. But Erik, you will correct me if I'm wrong.
No, he just is saying the hologram is a great example, and he's glad he thought of it.
There's another thing I've seen you interview, tall white aliens. You've gone down that road a bit. I'm kind of personally intrigued by that. I wonder, does Erik feel that's part of our shift as well? I mean, if we are made aware of another race of beings that may be more advanced, is that something coming down the line, does he feel soon? Lots of people talking about that.
You know, this is interesting for me because as the channeler, Erik and I usually don't go this route. I don't know why, but he's willing to say through me that they're already here.
Right.
Now, I don't know why he's not chosen to channel that way with them through me. Perhaps it's my own thing around it. I don't know. But he's saying they're already here and that we are not consciously open to working with anything, especially each other. So it's not time to be revealed. There'll come a time when the learning will be like in university. It'll be like you go to the university, you learn about it, but now is not the time. And I really do think he doesn't use me for that because I'm not sure where I'm at on that.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's the human thing with me.
Yeah.
I think it would create a bit too much fear anyway right now on the planet if that was to happen possibly.
And perhaps it's my own reluctance, and because he only uses mediums at their comfort level, only ever.
Well, I wouldn't want a small gray to just appear by my bedside. I would freak out. Okay, so a medium actually seeing a tall white.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
I've chosen not to, so I guess that's why.
Hey, what is he wearing today? Does he have a hat on or?
He's very chill. He says his hair's a hot mess.
Of course.
And he's pretty swanky. He's got a suit on with a skinny tie.
Oh, he loved Papa suits, he called them.
Yeah, and he's got sneakers on though.
Okay.
Vans or whatever they are, slip-ons, I don't know.
Looks like he dressed up.
Yeah.
Any teachers that he admires on the planet right now?
Eric? He's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
He's thinking. He's saying that there are a lot of, and he's using air quotes again, unknowns that he would like to help make known. He said it's an obvious choice to say Eckhart, it's an obvious choice to say the Dalai Lama, but he's looking towards the unknown. And he actually is part of he's using the word committee to bring forward some new teachers. Because he's saying essentially the message is the same, it's just that the messenger changes. And it's time that we have somebody that's different that has a different message.
Okay.
Just a heads up, you got three minutes.
Yep.
That could be the direction. That could be the directional change that he's talking about. A new messenger, a new message.
Okay. And I suppose I just wanted to ask you, in America, are you guys pretty famous? I saw you on Fox News there a few years ago. Like, is this word really getting out there, do you find?
It seems to be because I don't know, because I lead a very sheltered life with my little computer,
Well, I can tell you.
And such, but we've gotten in just the span of 2 weeks somebody who wants to do on Netflix a scripted show about our story, and then another guy who wants to do a reality TV show in our home, like the Kardashians meet spirituality. No, I'm just kidding about the title, but
the Osbournes.
Yeah, it's weird. And we've already been in like 3 documentaries, so.
And she's very humble, because I will tell you this. When I was blessed enough to come on board in September, my world exploded. Wow. And I mean exploded in a way that my heart opened. This woman is pure love. She gives everything inside of her. And then some. And she doesn't have a selfish bone in her body. And what's hers is yours. And she's just an amazing human being. And she's making a huge difference in the world with her son. And I'm just honored that I'm allowed to be part of it.
Oh, you're making a huge difference, and you're an awesome person, too.
Thank you.
I've just fallen in love with both of you after that statement.
Aww. We love you, too, Paul.
We all love you here, the 3 of us. So I think we've done an hour, so that's probably square for us. We've got the books. We've got some great information there. We're going to we're putting you as our main feature in the next issue, and it's going to come out first week in March, and we'll be putting that everywhere, and we'll tell the Irish people all about you and your beautiful son, and about you, Veronica. And if you ever come to Ireland, we'd love to host an evening. I don't know whether that might happen in 2019 or something.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Okay.
That's awesome. If you have any other questions, just
we can email stuff.
Email me.
Yeah, we can email
Okay.
stuff. Thank you so
Bye.
much. You want to say goodbye?
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye, guys. Bye,
That's
bye.
wonderful.
Bye, bye.
See you guys.
Bye, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.